The road to her father's property took 3 days on a borrowed horse and 1 night sleeping against a tree, because the coin for an inn had already gone to the debt collector in Merath. Lena paid Aldrich's debt before she went anywhere near the farm. That much she owed him, not out of sentiment, but because the alternative was arriving at an encumbered property she could neither sell nor walk away from cleanly. The collector had been surprised to see her. Most heirs, he said, took months to settle accounts. She handed him the purse and left before he finished the sentence. The farm looked smaller than she remembered. She had not been back in 4 years. Not since the last time her father appeared unannounced at the city where she worked, stayed 2 nights, said very little, and left before she woke on the 3rd morning. That was Aldrich, present in the way that certain things are present. A stone in a wall, functional, immovable, not given to explanation. The cellar door had rotted through. The eastern fence had collapsed into itself, the posts split at the base by 2 seasons of wet ground and no one to replace them. The well worked. She checked that first, hauling the bucket up and watching the water move in the afternoon light. Clean. At least there was that. She spent the first day assessing. The land was dry, not from drought, but from neglect. Aldrich had stopped working it years ago, which she had not known because he had also stopped mentioning it. The fields had gone to scrub. The small orchard beside the house had 3 surviving trees. The rest had died without pruning, without attention, without anyone noticing they were failing until they already had. She slept in the house that first night. The bed was made. The kitchen was clean. Whoever her father had been toward the land, he had kept the inside of the house with a precision that almost looked like expectation, as though he had always intended for someone to walk in and find things in order. That detail stayed with her all through the evening. The letter was in the drawer beneath the kitchen table. She found it on the 2nd day while cataloging what could be sold and what would have to be left. A sealed envelope with her name on the front in her father's handwriting, compact, slightly tilted to the right, exactly as she remembered from the rare notes he sent over the years. She opened it standing at the table. It was brief. The farm passed to her. The debt in Merath was covered by the sale of his stored goods. She had already handled that herself, which he had apparently anticipated, because the letter said only, "If it hasn't already been resolved, resolve it first." Then directions for the property, instructions for the existing arrangement with the neighbor 2 miles east, a note about the animals, and then at the bottom, a separate note. Folded once, sealed with black wax pressed with a symbol she did not recognize. She did not open it immediately. She set it on the table and walked outside and stood in the yard until the light changed. Then she went back in, sat down, and broke the seal. The symbol was carved into the wax, not stamped, deliberate, cut with something narrow. She studied it for a moment, then read. The cave is at the northern edge of the property, behind the old woodpile. The entrance is sealed with this same mark. You will know it when you find it. Go down only when you have nothing left to lose. Take a candle. He has been afraid of the dark since he was a child, though he will not admit it. That was all. No name, no explanation. No instruction for what she would find or what she was supposed to do with it. She read it twice, folded it again, and put it in her pocket. Instructions and a symbol, she said to the empty kitchen. That is all you left me. Her father did not answer. He was 3 weeks dead and not in the habit of answering even when he had been alive. She spent 2 more days working through the property. The neighbor to the east agreed to take the animals in exchange for use of the eastern field for the season. A reasonable arrangement. She recorded it on paper and had him sign, because that was the kind of thing her father would have done, and she was not going to leave loose ends that could become someone else's problem. On the 4th night, she sat at the kitchen table with the accounts in front of her and added everything up twice. The land was paid, the animals were placed. The house was structurally sound, if not profitable. What remained was a property that would take years of labor to bring back to any productive value, a sealed cave she had not yet opened, and no particular reason to stay past the end of the week. She had spent 4 years building a different life than this. Apprenticed to a record keeper in a merchant city 2 days' ride away, learning the systems that kept commerce functional, contracts, ledgers, the language of things that could be verified. She was good at it. Precise work suited her. She could leave in the morning, sell the property for what the land was worth in its current state, and go back. She sat with that option until the candle burned low. Then she went to bed. In the morning, she was standing at the northern edge of the property before she had consciously decided to go there. The woodpile was more a stack of rotted planks than anything else by now, but behind it, half hidden by overgrowth that someone had encouraged rather than simply allowed, was the entrance. Stone, cut into the hillside, sealed with a clay mixture that had dried and cracked slightly at the edges with age. In the center of the seal, carved clean and deep, the same symbol from the wax. She stood there for a while. Then she went back to the house, lit a candle, and returned. The seal broke with firm pressure at its edges. It had been designed to open, not to lock, permanently. The stone door behind it moved on a hinge mechanism she could feel in the resistance, heavy but deliberate. Someone had engineered this carefully. Not a natural cave made into a hiding place, but a constructed chamber made to look like one from the outside. The stairs were cut stone, even and narrow, descending at an angle that took her below the frost line within the first dozen steps. The air that rose to meet her was cold and mineral, carrying the sharpness of silver. Not like coins, something rawer than that. The candle flame bent forward as she descended, reaching toward the space below. She counted 31 steps before the floor leveled out. The chamber was wider than expected. Rough stone walls, natural in their irregularity, but the floor had been leveled by hand. Along the western wall, iron brackets held unlit torches, dry, maintained, waiting. Along the eastern wall, scratched into the stone at roughly seated height, were columns of marks that looked like calculations tracking something over time. In the center of the room, attached to the wall behind him by chains that crossed his chest and circled both wrists, was a man. He was very large. Even seated, even chained against stone, the scale of him registered before anything else. The width of his shoulders, the length of his legs stretched across the floor in front of him. The chains were silver, catching the candlelight with a cold and faint gleam. His head was down. Dark hair fell forward past his jaw, and the beard beneath it was full in the way that came from months rather than from choice. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, faint in this light, but visible. He raised his head before she spoke. His eyes were amber, not brown, not quite gold, something exact between the two. And the moment they found her face, they went still. Not with surprise, with something more deliberate. "You have his eyes," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. Not harsh, just worn thin, the way a voice goes when it has had nothing to do for a long time. She did not move from the base of the stairs. "Whose?" "Aldrich's." He said her father's name carefully, as though it were something he had been holding for a while without setting down. "He said you would come. He thought it would be sooner. He did not tell me what I was coming to find." "No." He held her gaze. "He said that a letter explaining everything would be a letter that could be found. That anyone watching this property after his death would search the house before you arrived. That you needed to reach this place before you reached any explanation of it." A pause. He was right about that kind of thing, as a rule. Lena looked at the chains, at the marks on the walls, at the torches her father had stocked and maintained, which meant he had been here recently, regularly, which meant this arrangement had continued for some time with her knowing nothing of it. "How long?" she said. 7 months. "And before that?" "I was the Alpha King." He said it without performance, the same way someone states a fact they have long since made peace with. "I remain so, in the legal sense, though that distinction matters less from this wall." She looked at the silver chains again, at the marks they had left on his wrists, old enough to have become a kind of record. "The chains. Whose decision?" "Mine." The chains shifted with a quiet sound as he adjusted his position slightly. "I was poisoned. The kind that corrupts the wolf gradually. Every use of alpha authority accelerates the damage. Uncontained, in 3 months, I would have been something without a mind left in it. The silver suppresses the wolf enough that the corruption stays bounded. And my father was the only person you trusted with this." He held her gaze for a moment before answering. "There was a list at the beginning. People I was certain of. By the time I needed to use it, Aldrich was the only name still standing." Lena was quiet. "He's dead," she said. 3 weeks ago. "I know." "Then you also know he cannot bring you the antidote he was trying to find." "Yes." She waited for him to ask her. To make a case, to appeal to her father's memory or the kingdom or something that might obligate her. He did not. He looked at the scratched calculations on the eastern wall, then back at her. "You should go," he said. "Seal the cave when you leave. The provisions here will last another 6 weeks with care. That is time enough for another solution to be found." She almost laughed. "You are not going to ask me to help. You do not owe me what your father chose to give." His voice was even. "That debt does not pass to you because it passed to you." Lena stood at the bottom of the stairs with the candle burning in her hand and looked at the man who had trusted her father completely enough to let himself be chained in his cellar for 7 months. At the calculations on the wall, at the torches Aldrich had replaced, and the provisions he had maintained, and the system of drainage channels she could see cut into the floor to manage groundwater, all of it constructed and kept by a man who never once mentioned any of it to her. "I will come back tomorrow," she said. "With food." He said nothing. She went back up the stairs. At the top, she stood in the pale morning light for a long moment, the candle still in her hand, the darkness of the chamber below her. She did not seal the cave. She came back the next morning. She did not think about it in the night as a decision to be made. She had told him she would come back. She came back. That was the full extent of the reasoning she was willing to apply to it. The provisions she brought were modest: bread from what remained in the kitchen, dried meat she had found in the cellar stores, a water skin filled from the well. She descended the stairs with the candle in one hand and the bundle in the other, and set everything within his reach without ceremony. He did not thank her. He did not make anything of it. She went back up. The second morning, she brought the same. The third morning, she added a second candle and lit the brackets along the western wall so the chamber was no longer dependent on the one she carried. He watched her do it and said nothing. On the fourth morning, it rained, and she came down later than usual. He was awake when she arrived, his eyes tracking her from the base of the stairs with the particular attention of someone who had learned to read approaching footsteps. "You were later today," he said. "The roof needed attention before the water got into the stores." He accepted this without comment. She sat down on the stone floor for the first time rather than leaving immediately. The chill came up through the ground and through her clothes, and she ignored it. The chamber looked different at this level. The scratched calculations on the eastern wall were more legible, and she could see that they were not random marks, but a careful record. Days, provisions, something measured in intervals she could not yet identify. "What are those?" she asked. He glanced at the wall. "Estimates. How long the silver is holding the corruption at each interval. How much it shifts with temperature. Your father took readings every time he came down." A pause. "He was thorough." "He was," she said, before she could decide whether she wanted to agree with him. The words sat between them. "Tell me something about him," she said. Not softly. It came out more direct than she intended, and she did not walk it back. Caden looked at her for a moment. "He interrupted me in council meetings," he said. Every alpha in the room knew better than to speak over the king during formal deliberation. Aldrich interrupted whenever he thought I was about to make an error, not loudly. He would simply say the next word in my sentence, and it would be the wrong word, wrong enough that I would stop to correct him, which meant stopping to think. The faint line of his mouth shifted. It took me 2 years to understand he was doing it on purpose. By that point, it had become useful. Lena stared at the wall. She had never heard that story. She had never heard most stories about her father's work because he did not tell them, and she had learned early not to ask. "He carried a miniature," Caden said. "A small painted portrait. Of you, I assume. A young girl, dark red hair, expression that suggested she found the painter's instructions irritating. He kept it inside his armor during campaigns. The guard protocol technically prohibits personal items of that kind during active movement. He kept it regardless. He never told me that." "No, he wouldn't." Caden's voice was even. "Telling you would have required acknowledging that the work put you at some level of risk. That was not a conversation he was prepared to have." Lena was quiet for a moment. The candles in the brackets threw steady light across the stone and across the chains, and she looked at where the silver met the skin of his wrists. The marks there old and layered, 7 months written into them. The chains, she said. Beyond what they do to the corruption, what else do they suppress? He did not answer immediately. When he did, it was measured without inflection that would make the information into something larger than information. The wolf's full range of perception, scent at range, the projection of instinct outward, the way an alpha reads a room, reads the people in it, and the mate bond if one were active. The silver closes the signal in both directions. Is one active? I don't know, he said. I haven't known for 7 months. She filed that away and did not press further. The rain continued through the afternoon. She went back up, patched what she could on the roof, ate something standing at the kitchen window, and watched the property turn gray and wet. The eastern fence she had noted on the first day was worse now, 2 more posts down under the weight of the water. She made a note to ask the neighbor if he had timber to spare. She came down again in the evening with the remainder of supper. This time, she stayed longer without deciding to. The council, she said. You said you suspect them. Tell me specifically. Caden was quiet for a moment, and she had the sense he was deciding how much to say. Not evasively, but with the particular care of someone accustomed to distinguishing between what was known and what was inferred. The poison requires a specific compound, he said. It does not occur naturally. It has to be prepared, and the preparation requires materials controlled through royal medical supply chains. There are 3 people in the kingdom with authorization to requisition those materials. 1 is dead. 1 is a healer in the Northern Territories who has served the crown for 30 years and has no political interest. The 3rd is Voss, the chief counselor. That is inference, not evidence. Yes. He did not seem bothered by that. But Voss also moved quickly after I disappeared. Within 3 weeks of my absence, he had reorganized the council's operational structure, taken direct oversight of 2 border agreements that previously required my seal, and redirected 3 garrison rotations in ways that benefit the merchant houses he is personally aligned with. A pause. A loyal man managing affairs in the king's absence would maintain those structures until the king's return. A man who believes the king is not returning does something different. And my father found evidence. Aldrich was getting close. He told me, 2 weeks before he died, that he had found a contact in Drevholt who could confirm where Voss was centralizing the antidote supply. He was going back to verify. Caden's voice remained even. He did not come back. The candle nearest her had burned lower than the others. She reached up and adjusted it in its bracket without thinking about it. You believe Voss had him killed? Yes. She sat with that for a long time. Rain moved across the hillside above them, in waves she could hear through the stone. A low, continuous sound that the chamber absorbed without quite eliminating. She thought about her father returning to Drevholt for a 3rd time. Thought about the way he had kept the house in order before he died. The bed made, the kitchen clean, the letter in its drawer. He had known he might not come back. He had prepared for it. She did not say anything for a while. When she finally spoke, her voice came out steady. The antidote is with Voss. Centralized in the council's administrative archive in Drevholt. That was the last confirmed information Aldrich had. He was going back to verify a specific location within the archive, but he did not get to use that information. No. She looked at him directly. What could I do that he could not? Caden held her gaze. Your father was known. Every move he made in Drevholt after the first visit was watched. He was beta to the Alpha King. His presence in that city, asking those questions, was a signal to anyone paying attention. He paused. You are no one. A farmer's daughter settling a dead man's estate. You have no rank and no history in that city, which means you have no profile. You can walk into spaces your father could not approach without announcing himself. That is not sufficient. No, he agreed. Alone, it is not. But you also have the seal. She reached into her pocket and took out the folded note. The black wax mark on the outside caught the light. This seal. It is mine, the Alpha King's personal mark. It carries legal authority that supersedes most council decisions, including the right to access royal administrative records on behalf of a direct royal proxy. He looked at it without expression. Your father never used it. He intended it for you. "He intended a great deal for me," she said, "that he did not bother to mention while he was alive." Yes, Caden's voice did not change. That was him. She folded the note and put it back in her pocket. Outside, the rain was easing. She could hear it shifting from a steady press to something intermittent, the spaces between drops growing longer. Morning would be clear, or clear enough. She was about to stand when the ground registered the change first. A low vibration in the floor, water moving through the drainage channels faster than the channels were designed to handle. She looked at the carved gutters along the base of the walls. The western channel was backing up. She crossed to it and crouched. The blockage was visible. Debris from the hill above, coming through with the runoff, clogging the junction where the main channel met the smaller overflow branch. She could clear it with her hand, but the overflow branch ran directly behind the bracket where the chain attached his left wrist to the wall. She would need to move it. She stood and looked at it. Then she looked at him. "The smaller chain on your left. If I remove it to reach the bracket, what happens?" He held her gaze. The answer came carefully. "The other chains will hold the corruption, but removing that one will give the wolf more room. I will not transform fully. What happens before the threshold, I cannot entirely predict. Can you contain it?" A pause that was its own kind of answer. "I intend to." She reached for the chain. The silver was cold through the cloth she used to handle it. She had learned on the second day not to move the chains with bare skin, not for her sake, but because the contact points were already damaged enough without her adding friction. The mechanism that attached it to the wall bracket was a simple iron pin, 7 months old and slightly stiff. She worked it free. The change was not immediate. Then it was. The skin of his forearm shifted. Not a wound, not damage. Something beneath the surface, rearranging itself under pressure it had been contained from expressing. The tendons moved in a way that tendons did not move. His shoulders dropped and expanded simultaneously in a motion that had no human equivalent, and his eyes, which had been amber a moment before, went gold, completely, flatly gold, without any of the gradation that made eyes look like eyes. The sound came from his chest before it became audible. By the time it reached the air, it was already filling the chamber, pressing against the walls and returning, a frequency that Lena felt in the bones of her sternum before she processed it as sound at all. She did not step back. 20 seconds, perhaps a little more. She stood at the drainage channel with the chain in her cloth-wrapped hand and watched him hold the line between what the wolf was demanding and what he had decided he would do. The gold in his eyes fractured slowly back to amber. The sound stopped. His shoulders settled. The silence afterward was different from the silence before. "I am sorry," he said. His voice had changed. Not unrecognizable, but lower and more deliberate, as though he were choosing each word from a shorter list than usual. "Don't be." She crouched and cleared the drainage blockage. The water moved freely again through the channel, rushing out to the hillside beyond. She reattached the chain to the bracket and worked the iron pin back into place. Stood. He was watching her with an expression she did not have a name for. "The antidote," she said. "Voss has it in Drevholt. My father had a contact there who confirmed the location." "Yes." "Tell me the contact's name." He told her. She repeated it once to fix it and then said nothing else for a moment. "You need to understand," she said, "that I am not doing this because of what you are, or because the kingdom requires a king, or because my father gave something to this that I now owe." He waited. "I am doing this because someone killed my father and called it natural causes," she said, "and because I am, apparently, the only person in a position to do anything about it." She picked up the water skin that had gone empty and the cloth she had used for the chains and walked to the stairs. "I will leave in 2 days," she said without turning. "I need to arrange the property before I go." Behind her, the chains shifted once with a quiet sound. Lena. Her name in his voice for the first time was not a summons. It was something more careful than that. "Your father said you would not forgive him for the things he kept from you." He was more afraid of that than of anything the council might do. She stopped on the 3rd step. "He was right to be afraid of it," she said. She went up into the dark of the early morning and stood outside the cave entrance for a long time before she went back to the house. She spent the day before leaving settling what could be settled. The neighbor to the east, a broad, quiet man named Udell, who had known her father by sight and nothing more, agreed to watch the property for 2 weeks in exchange for continued use of the eastern field. She wrote the arrangement on paper, had him sign it, and kept the copy. He asked no questions about where she was going. She offered no answers. She went down to the cave in the late afternoon, later than usual. Caden registered the time before she spoke. She had noticed he did that, tracked the intervals between her arrivals with the precision of someone who had learned to use routine as a measure of something. "I leave tomorrow at first light," she said. "Drevholt." "Yes, Pyra is the name you gave me. I know what to look for and where to start." She set down the provisions, enough for 5 days if he rationed them carefully, stacked within easy reach. "Udell next door has the animals and the property. I paid him through the end of the month." Caden looked at the provisions without comment. "The antidote," she said. "If I bring it back, what are the instructions?" He walked her through it precisely. The dosage, the timing, the physical process of the corruption retreating, and what that would look like. He spoke without hesitation, which told her he had thought through this scenario many times in the months alone against that wall. She repeated the instructions back to him. He corrected one detail. She repeated it again. "One more thing," he said, as she moved toward the stairs. "The seal. Do not use it as an opening move. Use it when someone has already decided what you are. The symbol works on fear, not on authority. It is most effective when the person seeing it has already underestimated you." She looked at him for a moment. "My father told you that? Your father taught me that." Something shifted in his expression. He said it was the first principle of moving through rooms where you are not expected. She went up the stairs and did not look back. The road to Drevholt was nearly 2 days of riding on a horse she had borrowed from Udell in exchange for a week's reduction of the field arrangement. The horse was older and steady, which suited her better than something faster and unpredictable. She carried the seal in a leather pouch inside her coat, next to her father's original note. She carried the provisions she needed, and very little else. The first day the road ran through open country, low hills, scattered holdings, the occasional waystone marking distance. She passed 2 other riders going the opposite direction in the morning, and no one after midday. The sky was the flat white of late season, the kind of light that made distances hard to judge. She made camp at a way station near a stream crossing, ate without a fire because the wood was wet, and slept in the station's covered corner with her back to the wall. The second day the road descended toward the valley where Drevholt sat. The city emerged from the morning mist gradually. First the mill towers, then the outer walls, then the roof lines of the market district rising behind them. It was larger than any city Lena had lived in. Her father's city, in some sense, though he had never brought her here. She stabled the horse at a yard near the south gate and paid for 3 days. Then she walked into the city and began looking for Pyra. The name and the general location were what Caden had given her. A merchant who dealt in preserved goods and dry supplies, operating from a warehouse near the East Canal. She found the street without much difficulty. The warehouse had a sign above the door that had been repainted recently, the wood still light where the old color had been sanded back. The woman who answered her knock was shorter than Lena expected, with gray coming through dark hair and hands that were ink-stained on the right from some kind of ongoing ledger work. She looked at Lena with the flat assessment of someone who had been in trade long enough to read people quickly. "I am looking for Pyra," Lena said. "Who is asking?" "Aldrich's daughter." A pause. The woman's expression did not change exactly, but something behind it did. She stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. "Close it behind you." The inside of the warehouse was organized in the particular way of someone who managed volume with limited space. Stacks of crates marked with chalk, narrow paths between them, a desk near the window that was barely visible under its accumulation of papers. Pyra moved to the desk and turned to face her. "He said you would come if he did not," Pyra said. "He did not say when. 3 weeks after he died. I heard about the death." Pyra's voice was even. "They called it natural. I did not believe it. But there is a particular kind of disbelief that is safer kept to oneself when the alternative is making it known in a city where Voss has eyes. Tell me what my father was doing here," Pyra told her. 3 visits in the last 4 months of his life. The first had been reconnaissance, Aldrich asking general questions about council supply movements through Drevholt, the kind of questions a beta might plausibly ask for administrative reasons. The second had been more specific. He had found a discrepancy between the official inventory records for rare medical compounds and the actual movement of those goods through the city's merchant channels. Something was being requisitioned through royal authority and not appearing in the distribution records that should have followed. He came back a third time, Pyrrha said, 6 weeks before he died. He asked me to find out where Voss was keeping the centralized stock, not where it was supposed to be, where it actually was. And you found it. It took 2 weeks after he left. A supplier who moves goods in and out of the council building told me that Voss had moved all restricted medical inventory out of the general stores 2 years ago and into the administrative archive, his own section of it. Nothing goes in or out without his personal authorization. Lena thought about that. Why the archive? Why not somewhere less accessible? Because the archive is the one place in that building where Voss has absolute control of who enters and what is recorded, Pyrrha said. General stores have oversight staff, inventory clerks, rotation schedules. The archive has Voss. My father knew this. He knew I was finding it. He did not know the answer before he went back. Pyrrha was quiet for a moment. He also told me, on that third visit, that he had a daughter, that she carried a mark, that if he did not return, I should wait, that she would come when she was ready. A pause. He said you were stubborn, that you would not come until you had no other choice. Lena did not say anything. He was right, she said eventually. She spent the rest of that day with Pyrrha, mapping what was known. The council building was near the city center, a permanent administrative structure that had served the kingdom's regional affairs for generations. Access to the archive required either a staff authorization or a legal standing, an estate claim, a contract dispute, a formal petition. Staff authorizations were slow. Legal standings were immediate. Daughter of a beta claiming estate records, Pyrrha said. It is legitimate. He was a royal servant. His dependents have standing to access his administrative files. And from within the archive, the medical inventory would be adjacent? Same corridor, different room, but the same corridor. Voss keeps it locked, but the lock is a standard council mechanism. Nothing designed to withstand someone who knows where to look and has a reason to be there. She left Pyrrha's warehouse in the late afternoon with a clearer shape of the plan than she had arrived with. The streets were busy at that hour, merchants closing transactions, laborers finishing shifts, the particular density of a city in the hour before supper. She walked back toward the inn she had identified near the south gate. She was 2 streets away when she noticed the first one, a man on the opposite side of the road, moving at the same pace she was. She slowed slightly. He slowed. She turned right at the next junction instead of going straight. He turned right. She moved normally for another block, then turned left. He adjusted. She kept walking. At the next junction, she turned right again, which took her away from the inn. He stayed with her. She spent a moment thinking, not looking back, using the reflections in a metalworker's window to watch the street behind her. A second man was following the same route, half a block further back. 2 of them. She changed her route again, this time toward the canal. The streets near the water were narrower and wound in ways that did not follow the grid of the city center. She knew this in theory from Pyrrha's descriptions, and she moved into the network of lanes without slowing to consult anything. The men behind her adapted, but the tighter streets removed their ability to follow at comfortable distance. They either closed the gap or risked losing her at a junction. She waited until a junction where 3 lanes met at an uneven angle, used the blind corner to move quickly into the second lane rather than the one her direction suggested, crossed to the canal path, went north along the water for 200 paces, then cut back east through a covered passage between 2 warehouse buildings that led out near the grain market. She stood in the grain market for 3 minutes and watched both entry points. Neither man appeared. She went back to the inn by a different route. Pyrrha came to find her that evening, which surprised her. She had not expected the woman to move that quickly or to know where she was staying. Pyrrha simply said that Aldrich had always used this inn, and that it had seemed a reasonable assumption. The men who followed you, Pyrrha said, keeping her voice low in the inn's corner. I know the type. Freelance work, usually for merchant houses that have interests aligned with the council. They sell information. They do not report directly to Voss. But the information could reach him within a day or two, possibly less if someone is paying for speed. Lena looked at the table. Then the window is shorter than I planned. Yes. She turned it over in her mind. The original idea had been to take another day to refine the approach. That day was no longer available. The moment Voss heard that a woman had arrived in the city using Aldrich's name and asking questions, the administrative standing she intended to use would become complicated. He would have time to prepare. He would be watching for her. She needed to be inside the archive before he received the report. Tomorrow, she said. Morning, first access hour. Pyrrha did not argue. I can be your witness. A dependent claiming estate documents typically presents with someone who can attest to the relationship. A neighbor, a trade contact of the deceased. You knew my father. For 11 years. A pause. I will be there. Lena sat for a moment after Pyrrha left, alone at the corner table while the inn noise continued around her. Tomorrow she would walk into the council building with her father's name and a seal she did not fully understand, and find something that a man twice her age and with a lifetime of training had not managed to retrieve. She ate the supper that arrived without tasting it. Then she went upstairs, lay down on the bed without removing her coat, and stared at the ceiling until the candle burned out on its own. She was not afraid exactly. Fear had a particular quality that she recognized from experience, a narrowing of what was possible, a kind of paralysis that preceded bad decisions. What she felt instead was simpler than that. The window was closing. Tomorrow was the opening in it. Everything else was detail. She closed her eyes. In the morning, she would go in. Pyrrha was waiting at the corner of the grain market at the first hour, dressed in the practical clothing of someone conducting ordinary business. She carried a leather satchel and wore an expression that suggested nothing remarkable was happening. Lena fell into step beside her without greeting, and they walked together toward the city center. The council building was stone, old and wide, occupying a full block near the central square. Its entrance was flanked by 2 guards who watched without moving as Lena and Pyrrha approached. The guards wore the regional council's colors, not royal colors. A distinction Lena had not expected to matter until she was standing in front of them and understanding that the building's authority derived from the council, not from the crown. Daughter of Aldrich, late beta to the Alpha King, Lena said. Here to claim estate documents under servant inheritance standing. This is my witness. One guard looked at her, then at Pyrrha. He did not move. The archive clerk opens at first hour, he said. You can wait inside. They went in. The interior was cool and smelled of old stone and lamp oil. A clerk at a reception desk near the entrance took her name without looking up, wrote something in a ledger, and directed them to a corridor on the left. The corridor was long and quiet, lined with numbered doors. At the far end, a woman sat at a smaller desk with a lamp and a stack of folders. The archive clerk was older, with a precise manner and no apparent interest in the people she processed. She reviewed Lena's stated standing with the detachment of someone who had confirmed the same kind of claim dozens of times. Daughter of a royal servant. Deceased. Estate period still open. Legal standing verified. Administrative files for the deceased are in Section 4, the clerk said, and handed Lena a numbered card. Return this when you leave. You may not remove original documents from Section 4, but you may copy. Lena took the card. Section 4 was 3 rooms down the main archive corridor. The door was unlocked. Inside, wooden drawers were organized by name in alphabetical order, each drawer labeled in chalk that had been refreshed enough times to leave a faint white haze around the labels. She found her father's name on the 3rd drawer from the top on the left-hand wall. She pulled it open. The files inside were administrative records spanning 11 years of service, garrison rotation approvals, campaign supply requisitions, council meeting attendance logs with her father's signature confirming presence. The kind of accumulated documentation that a beta generated simply by doing the work, not evidence of anything, not significant on its own, but layered and specific in the way that real work is specific. She moved through it steadily. Behind her, Pyrrha stood near the door, positioned to see the corridor through the small gap she had left it open. Near the back of the drawer, A thinner folder held personal record-keeping. Her father's own notes, clearly not official documents. Shorthand entries she could not fully read, but that followed a pattern of dates and names. The last entry was dated 6 weeks before his death. The name that appeared most frequently in the final 10 entries was Voss. She did not need to read shorthand to understand what she was looking at. She memorized the final 3 dates and closed the folder. The medical archive was 2 doors down the corridor on the opposite side. This door was locked. She had expected this. Pyrrha had described it. She crouched and examined the mechanism. A standard council lock, the same model used on most of the other doors she had passed. Her father had taught her this without meaning to, years ago, showing her how the administrative buildings in Merath used identical fittings, because the contracts for building maintenance went to the same supplier across every regional city. She had thought at the time that he was simply filling silence. She understood now that he was never simply filling silence. The pin inside the mechanism was accessible through the upper seam with something narrow. She used the edge of the metal clasp from the ledger pouch she carried, working it into the gap and applying lateral pressure. It took 4 tries. On the 5th, the pin shifted and the door released. She went in. The medical archive was smaller than Section 4. 1 wall of locked cabinets, 1 work table, a single lamp bracket that was unlit. She used the small candle she had brought for exactly this reason and held it close to the cabinet labels. Restricted compounds. The label was handwritten, not chalk, permanent, deliberate. The cabinet was locked with the same mechanism as the door. She opened it in 2 tries. The requisition files were organized by date. She went to the period Caden had identified and pulled the relevant folders. The requisitions were there, signed by Voss. The compound names meant nothing to her, but the dates were precise, and the authorization codes were not standard. They bypassed the normal 2-signature approval requirement for restricted materials, replaced by a single override notation in Voss's hand. She had no way to prove what the compounds were used for standing in this room. What she had was that Voss had requisitioned restricted materials, authorized only by himself, during the exact period that Caden had been poisoned. She crossed to the work table, found a stack of blank inventory slips, and copied the authorization codes, dates, compound names, and override notations in a hand as exact as she could make it. The copies were not the files themselves, but they fixed the pattern on paper, which mattered. She turned to the second folder she had pulled. This one was not an official document. It was a single page, folded and placed between 2 official files in a way that suggested it had been stored here rather than in the formal record. Something kept accessible without being filed. The handwriting was the same as the authorization overrides. She had seen enough of Voss's handwriting by now to identify it. The notation was brief. A date. Then, the Beta's continued inquiry presents a resolution requirement. The matter should be closed before the next council session. Authorized. The date was 11 days before her father died. She stood with it in her hands for a moment. The candlelight was steady. The room was quiet. She read it twice to make certain she understood the plain meaning of what she was reading. Then she folded it carefully, placed it inside her coat with the copied requisition notes, and turned to the cabinet where the physical compounds were stored. The antidote was not labeled as such. She had memorized the compound name Caden had given her. She found the corresponding vial in the 3rd row, small, sealed with wax, the contents a dark amber that caught the candlelight. She took it. She closed the cabinet and left the room exactly as she had found it, except for what she carried. Pyrrha was in the corridor when she came out. The expression on Pyrrha's face told her before the sound of footsteps did. Voss came from the direction of the entrance. He was older than she had imagined him. Not elderly, but the specific age of a man who had been powerful long enough that power had become his resting state. He was well dressed in the quiet way of someone who did not need to announce wealth. He walked without urgency, which was its own kind of statement. He stopped 10 feet from her and looked at her the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved and are now simply confirming. "You are Aldrich's daughter," he said. It was not a question. "Yes. I was told you arrived yesterday." He glanced at the medical archive door, which she had pulled shut behind her. I had hoped to be here before you made any regrettable decisions. I claimed estate documents in Section 4, she said. I am entitled to that access under servant inheritance standing. I have the clerk's authorization card. Of course you do. His voice was pleasant. And what else did you find during your visit? She did not answer. Let me tell you what you have, he said, not unkindly, moving toward the plain statement of it, the way someone moves toward a conclusion they find inevitable. You have unsigned speculation and circumstantial dates. You have a woman without rank, without wolf, without standing in any formal council proceeding, making allegations against the chief counselor of the realm. In the event that you were to present what you believe you have found to any legitimate body, the question of your credibility would be resolved before the question of my conduct. He paused. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes, she said. You are telling me that you are protected by the structures you control. I am telling you that the truth of a thing and the provability of that thing are not the same. He said it gently. Your father knew this. It is why, despite his talent for investigation, he was ultimately unable to act on what he found. She reached into her coat. Voss watched her. She took out the seal, not the note, just the seal itself, the wax disc with its carved mark. She placed it on the work table beside her, face up, without speaking. The effect was not immediate. He looked at the mark. His expression did not change in the way that fear changes an expression. No widening of the eyes, no flinching. But something in the room shifted. He was calculating. She could see it. The Alpha King is missing, he said. That mark proves nothing about his current status or his authorization of... The mark is witnessed, she said. She had not looked at them until now. She looked at them now. 3 men in merchant dress who had been in the corridor when she emerged from the medical archive. They had the look of people who had been conducting their own business in the building and found themselves caught in someone else's confrontation, which was exactly what they were. They had not moved. They were watching. Voss looked at them too. A longer look. The Alpha King's personal seal, invoked in front of civilian witnesses, in a building that nominally operated under royal authority. Any order he gave her in this moment, any command to surrender what she carried, any instruction that could be read as suppression of a royal proxy, would be observed, remembered, and repeatable by merchants, by trade contacts, by people whose interests were in stability, not in Voss's stability specifically. The math of it moved across his face without expressing itself as emotion. You are making a significant error in judgment, he said quietly. My father made careful judgments for 11 years, she said. I watched from a distance and thought he was simply a cautious man. I understand now that caution and fear are not the same thing either. She picked up the seal from the table and put it back in her coat. I am leaving. If anyone follows me out of this building or beyond the city gate, the documents I carry go to every merchant house in this valley before I reach the road. Voss said nothing. She walked past him toward the corridor entrance. Pyrrha fell into step beside her. Neither of them moved quickly. Moving quickly would have been the wrong thing. Speed said she was uncertain, and she was not uncertain. She simply wanted to be out of this building and on the road before Voss finished calculating whether the risk of stopping her publicly outweighed the risk of letting her go. The clerk at the end of the corridor took back the numbered card without looking up. The guards at the entrance watched them leave. Outside, the morning had turned bright. The square in front of the building was active with mid-morning movement. Merchants, workers, a line of carts waiting to unload near the side entrance of a granary. Normal, indifferent. Lena kept walking. At the corner where the square met the road toward the south gate, she stopped. Pyrrha! She turned to face the older woman. When Caden returns to the kingdom, and he will return, the name Pyrrha will be in the account of what was done here and what it cost to do it. My father trusted you for 11 years. I will make certain that trust is acknowledged formally. Pyrrha looked at her for a moment. Your father, she said, talked about you the way people talk about things they are proud of, but afraid to claim. A pause. I think he would have said that what you just did in there was well done. He would have said I was reckless, Lena said. Yes, Pyrrha agreed, but he would have meant the same thing. They separated at the corner. Lena went south toward the stable yard. She did not look back toward the council building. Whatever Voss was doing in the aftermath of the last 20 minutes was his problem to manage, and she did not have time to care about it. The horse was ready in the time it took her to collect it, pay the remaining stable fee, and check that everything she carried was secured. She rode out through the south gate before the morning was half done. She did not stop that first night. The road through the open country was quiet in the dark, the horse steady on the familiar surface, and she kept moving through the way station where she had camped on the way in without pausing. The cold did not matter. The tiredness did not matter. In her coat, she had a vial of amber compound and a folded page in Voss's handwriting that said plainly what had been done to her father. She rode through most of the next day as well, letting the horse breathe only in short intervals near water and shade. By dusk, its stride had shortened. By full dark, she was half afraid of breaking it before she reached the property. She gave it 3 hours in the lee of a low stone wall, slept sitting upright with the reins looped around her wrist, and started again before the eastern horizon had fully lightened. She reached the farm as the sky was moving from black to the particular gray that preceded dawn. Not light yet, but the beginning of the suggestion of it. The horse was exhausted. She brought it to the stable, removed the saddle and bridle, left it with water and feed, and crossed the yard to the cave entrance without going inside the house. The seal on the entrance was as she had left it. She went in. The descent felt different in the state she was in. 2 days of riding without proper rest, the cold of the road still in her shoulders, the residual alertness of a body that had been ready for something to go wrong for 48 hours straight. She counted the steps automatically. 31. The chamber below was lit. She had left 2 of the brackets burning on a long wick before she went, calculating the time. 1 had burned out. The other still held. She saw the change before she reached the floor. The corruption had advanced significantly. It showed in his eyes first. They were shifting without his direction, amber breaking into gold and back again in a cycle that had the quality of something uncontrolled, a rhythm his body was producing without his authorization. His hands were still. His breathing was even. But the eyes moved with a restlessness that had not been there when she left. He tracked her down the stairs and held her gaze when she reached the bottom, and for a moment the amber steadied. "You came back faster than the timeline," he said. "The timeline changed." She crossed to him and crouched, pulling the vial from inside her coat. "The window closed faster than I planned. I left Drevholt early." His eyes moved to the vial. Something crossed his expression. Not relief, not yet. Something more guarded than relief. The particular restraint of a person who has not allowed themselves to anticipate a good outcome for long enough that the habit has calcified. "The documents," he said. "Inside my coat. Copies of requisition entries signed by Voss, with dates matching the poisoning period. And a separate notation in his hand, authorizing what he called a resolution requirement for my father, dated 11 days before his death." She held his gaze. "It is enough for a formal proceeding. Not a certainty, but enough to force one." He was quiet for a moment. "Tell me how you got out." "I used the seal in front of witnesses and walked." She uncapped the vial. "There is time for the rest of it later. Right now, you need to tell me if anything has changed about the instructions." Nothing has changed. She administered the antidote with the care she had applied to every task in this chamber. Deliberate, without hesitation, following the precise sequence Caden had described and that she had repeated back to him until she had it exact. The dosage went in 3 intervals, not 1. The second interval required a pause of several minutes. She sat on the stone floor and waited out the pause and watched his face for any change. The first sign was the eyes steadying. Not fully, not immediately, but the cycling slowed and then stopped, the amber settling back into its own color and staying there. He exhaled once, a slow and controlled release that she understood was not simply breath. "Continue," he said. She gave him the 3rd interval. The process that followed was not fast. She had known it would not be fast. He had described it as the corruption retreating in waves, each wave requiring time, and she had understood the words, but the reality of it was longer and more demanding than words had prepared her for. She sat on the floor beside him and did not leave, and did not make conversation, and did not do anything except stay present in the chamber, while the antidote moved through him and the poison that had been eating at his wolf for 7 months began to lose its hold. There were 2 hours in the middle of it where his temperature dropped sharply and the sweat on his face went cold. She built a small fire in the stone depression near the drainage channel, dry wood from the cache her father had stacked against the far wall, and kept it burning until the color returned to his hands. Near mid-morning, the chains went loose. Not broken, the mechanism simply released, one after another, the silver falling away from his wrists and chest as the wolf beneath his skin recovered enough strength to push against them. He caught them before they clattered to the floor, set them down quietly. Then he was still for a long moment, seated against the wall with his hands free for the first time in 7 months, looking at them. He stood slowly. The movement was careful at first, the adjustment of a body relearning its full range. And then it was not careful at all. He straightened to his full height, and the chamber that had seemed adequate for its purpose looked immediately smaller. He rolled his shoulders once, turned his head, pressed his palm flat against the stone wall, and held it there for several seconds as though confirming the pressure was real. Then he looked at her. "I need to shift," he said. "The wolf has been contained for 7 months. If I do not give it a full release now, the pressure will become unmanageable within hours." She had watched the partial expression of it when the chain came off his arm. She knew what was coming was larger than that, and she was already standing at the wall opposite him with her back to the stone, giving him the center of the chamber. "Do it," she said. What followed was not like the partial shift. There was no ambiguity about what it was, no question of degree. The transformation was complete, and it was not graceful. It was thorough, total, the body remaking itself under absolute biological authority. The sounds of it were concrete and structural, the kind that registered in the body before the mind categorized them. His clothing did not survive it. The wolf that stood in the center of the chamber where the man had been was enormous, dark brown, almost black in the low light, with the breadth of something that had not existed on a smaller scale and was not pretending otherwise. It stood completely still. She did not move. The wolf looked at her with eyes that were gold all the way through, and she looked back. And neither of them did anything for a span of time she could not have measured with any accuracy. The fire she had built had burned low, but was still producing light, and in that light, the wolf's stillness had a quality she could only describe as deliberate. Not the stillness of an animal assessing threat, but the stillness of something choosing not to act. Then it shifted back. The process in reverse was the same, complete, certain, without half measures. Caden came back to himself on one knee on the chamber floor, breathing hard, dark hair forward past his jaw. The scar above his left eyebrow was vivid in a way it had not been before. The pale stone dust that had accumulated on his skin over months of captivity, now gone. The mate bond activated without warning or approach. It was not a warmth. That word was insufficient for what moved through her chest and down into her sternum and out through her arms. Not heat exactly, but a current, something running through channels she had not known were there until they were lit. Her breath caught once, sharp, involuntary. She pressed her back against the stone wall and stayed very still. Caden raised his head. His eyes found her immediately, and in them she saw the recognition before she understood what she was recognizing. He was on his feet before she processed the motion, standing upright in the center of the chamber, and his expression had changed into something she had not seen on him before. Not the measured containment of months of careful conversation, but something rawer and more immediate underneath it, held in place by effort that was now visible. He did not come toward her. "What is this?" she said. It did not come out as a question. "The bond," he said. His voice was different, rougher, more direct, the careful management of it stripped away by whatever the shift had released. The silver was suppressing it, both directions. When the chains came off and the wolf came back fully, He stopped, looked at her directly. "I told you about this. You told me the silver was suppressing the signal. You said you did not know if a bond was active. I know now." She stared at him. "I do not have a wolf. No." He held her gaze without flinching from the complication of it. "But your father was Beta for 11 years. Before him, his father served the pack. 3 generations of bloodline woven into pack structure. The bond can find a path through that. It is not common. I have seen it recorded once, in documents older than this kingdom. A pause. I am not telling you this to make it into something you did not choose. I am telling you because you asked, and because you deserve the honest answer. She stood against the stone wall and felt the current still moving through her chest, faint now but present, like something that had been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. What does it mean for what happens next, she said. Nothing that you do not decide it means. His voice was even again, the effort of it no longer visible, or rather, visible but controlled. The bond is not a command. It is a fact about what exists between us. What you do with a fact is always a choice. She held that in silence for a moment. You have a kingdom to return to, she said. Yes. And Voss? Yes. He moved to where his clothing had not survived the shift, assessed the situation without expression, and reached for the folded spare that she had left in the provision stack 3 days ago. She had not known exactly why she had brought it, only that it had seemed practical. He dressed without comment. She looked at the fire. The documents you brought will be enough to open formal proceedings before the other alphas, he said. Voss is politically protected within the council, but not beyond it. The requisition records establish motive and access. His own notation establishing intent toward my beta is... He paused. That will not be dismissed. It was not sealed or formally witnessed. No. But it is in his hand, which I can confirm, and combined with the copied requisition records and 7 months of unexplained absence on my part, it constructs an account that other alphas will require him to answer for. He looked at her directly. It will not be clean. These things never are. There will be a period of political instability that I cannot fully predict the shape of. I did not ask you to predict it, she said. I asked what the documents were worth. They are worth forcing the proceeding, he said, which is what matters. The fire had burned down to coals. She looked around the chamber, at the walls her father had shaped and maintained, at the marks recording 7 months of careful measurement, at the torches replaced, and the drainage channels cut, and the provisions stacked with the particular precision of someone who had done this quietly, and alone, and without telling anyone. He talked about you, Caden said. She looked at him. In the months here. We talked at length, your father and I, the way 2 people talk when there is nothing else to do, and time is the one thing that is abundant. He talked about the work, about strategy, about the council and its patterns. But when the work ran out, he kept circling back to the same subject, the life he had tried to keep separate from all of it. He paused. Not the way a beta talks about an asset or a contingency. The way a man tries, awkwardly, to account for the one choice he never fully knew whether he had made correctly. She did not say anything. He described the argument you had when you left for Marith, Caden said. You told him you were not going to stay on a farm, learning to be someone's wife. And he told you the city was no place for a girl alone, and you told him that you would rather be wrong about the city than right about the farm. He said he stood at the gate and watched you go, and did not call you back because he could not argue with the logic of it. She felt something shift in her chest that was not the bond. He said he had a miniature painted 2 years after you left, from memory, because you were not there to sit for it. He said the painter complained that he kept correcting the expression, that the painter kept making you look pleasant, and Aldrich kept saying that was not right, that you looked like you found most things mildly insufficient, and that was not the same as unpleasant, and that he wanted it accurate. She looked at the wall. The marks her father had made, tracking days and measurements, and the careful management of something he had taken on alone. He kept it, she said. Inside his armor. Yes. He showed it to me once. He was right about the expression. She did not speak for a long moment. What she had believed for most of her adult life was that her father had chosen the work over her, that the distance between them was a preference rather than a calculation, that she had been the thing he set aside in favor of the thing he was built for. Standing in the chamber, he had maintained for 7 months, having ridden to Drevholt with a seal she did not fully understand in her pocket, and returned with copied requisition entries and Voss's own notation proving what had been done to him. She understood that the distance had been the opposite of indifference. He had built a wall between her and his world, because his world killed people. He had left her the seal and the cave and the cryptic note because he had calculated, with the same precision he brought to everything else, that if the worst happened, she would be the one person positioned to act. He had turned his daughter into the safeguard without ever asking whether she wanted to be one. She was angry about it. She was also, underneath that, something else she did not have a clean word for. "He should have told me," she said. Yes, Caden did not qualify it. He should have. She crossed to the drainage channel and checked it out of habit, clear, flowing properly. Then she picked up the empty provision satchel and folded it and set it on the shelf her father had built into the western wall. She did not know why she did that. It seemed like the kind of thing that should be left tidy. Caden was watching her when she turned. "I have contacts in the Eastern Garrison that remained loyal throughout my absence," he said. "Men who knew what Aldrich was investigating and who have been waiting for something to act on. With what you brought from Drevholt, they can move formally. How long before you reach them?" 3 days to the eastern border at speed. She thought about the farm above them, the house with the made bed and the clean kitchen, the field arrangement with Udell that ran to the end of the month. None of it needed her specifically. The property would be what it was whether she stayed or went. "The seal," she said. "What is it standing once you return publicly?" "It remains mine, which means anyone who acted under its authority acted under mine." He held her gaze. "What you did in Drevholt will be on record as authorized. I did not do it for the authorization." "I know." A pause. "That is not why I am telling you." They stood in the chamber that had been her father's secret for the better part of a year, with the coals cooling in the stone depression and the last bracket still burning on the eastern wall, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Lena picked up the candle she had carried down 31 steps 2 weeks ago and started up the stairs. "I need to settle the property arrangements for longer than the end of the month," she said. "That will take most of the morning." Behind her, she heard him follow, the sound of a man on stairs rather than the silence of months of stillness, feet on stone, moving upward. "I will wait," he said. They came out of the cave together into the mid-morning light. The yard was quiet. The sky above the hill was clear and cold, the kind of clear that came after rain. Somewhere in the eastern field, Udell's cart was moving, the creak of it carrying on the still air. She did not look back at the cave entrance. There was a kingdom ahead of them, in a state of disarray, a counselor who would not stay quiet, and a bond between them that was real and unresolved and neither simple nor convenient. She was aware of all of it with the same practical clarity she brought to drainage channels and stable accounts. But she paused at the edge of the yard, one hand on the gatepost, and looked out at the eastern field where Udell's cart was moving through the morning. The farm was still dry. The orchard still had only 3 living trees. The fence on the eastern side still needed posts. None of that had changed. What had changed was harder to name. 2 weeks ago, she had descended 31 steps with a candle and found a man she had no reason to trust and no particular desire to help. She had helped him anyway, not out of duty to his title or her father's memory, but because the alternative had been to walk away from the only honest account of who Aldrich had actually been. She had needed that account more than she had admitted to herself until now. She heard Caden stop a few feet behind her. He did not speak, and she did not turn, and the silence between them was different from the silences of the past 2 weeks. Not the careful quiet of 2 people learning how much to say, but something with more room in it. He would have hated that it worked out, she said. Why? Because it was his plan. She let go of the gatepost. He would have considered that enough and insisted on no further acknowledgement of it. A pause. Then quietly, "Yes, that is exactly what he would have done." She almost smiled. "Almost. 3 days to the Eastern Garrison," she said, and pushed the gate open. "I will be ready before you are." She walked toward the house to begin the arrangements, and this time she did not have to listen to hear that he followed.